Welcome to the Learning to Die podcast.
I'm Ian Doonican.
And I'm Kieran O'Regan.
How do I live when I know I must die?
We explore areas of philosophy, psychology, martial arts, culture, existential risk, history, society, religion, science, and anything else that seems of interest and relevance to answering that question.
We can only hope that some of what we learn might be of benefit to you too. Namaste, sapiens. This is fucking gold.
Oh no.
Come on, Gordon. Tell us where you grew up. Tell us this story.
Okay, so I grew up on the Jersey Shore, Italian, very identified with my Italian roots, more than anybody in my family probably, and learned the languages. So I go to New York. I'm in New York on boxing, and I'm married to a heroin addict. And at the time, so I got a job. Jake LaMotta went to make his movie Raging Bull, and so I got a job at this topless club in Times Square, which used to be much different in the 70s, right? And so these guys, yeah, it was really grungy and shit, you know what I mean? It was really just different, you know. It was like, what's the place in Boston that's kind of like Times Square used to be? I forget what it was called, but anyhow, this very time. So Jake LaMotta went to make Raging Bull, and they hired me. So I come in there, and I wanted to be, as I said, a mobster. It was a mob bar. I found out soon thereafter, and and they said it was funny because they were saying that Jake would like kick anybody's ass who came through the door because he was like 5'6", and you know people would start up with him like, and these guys were hitmen running the place, and they were saying we're so glad to get rid of Jake for a while, right? Because he pushed everyone's head right through the glass and stuff, right? So, but seriously, man, these were so, and everybody who came there thought they were going to be fucking the dancers, right? But there was no chance of that. So people who come from South America, wherever, come to Times Square and they think they're hooking up with these girls, and that just wasn't going to happen. But anyhow, so I one night I got really drunk and came into the bar, jumped on the bar, jumped on the counter or whatever, got fired. And I think of it, man, like I had no idea what I was getting into. You know what I mean? Probably saved my life because 6 months later they would have been saying, go kill so-and-so, right? Or go break somebody's legs probably to start off, right? I couldn't do that stuff. But so getting drunk saved my life that night probably.
It was a lucky escape, man, yeah.
Huh? Yeah. I was
lucky escape.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, it was kind of like a thug life with certain, I identified with their power and they're cool. So one day I happened to strike up a friendship with this great American writer you should check out, Gay Talese, who wrote Honor Thy Father. And he started this new journalism, so to speak, in which people looked at things from the angle of loser, all these different new perspectives. Hunter Thompson, all those guys were Wolf too. And so one day I got to sit and just talk with Gay Talese, who's Italian. And I said, I was telling him, man, I thought those guys were cool. And Gay is this guy in his 80s. He says to me in this cool voice, he goes, they are cool. And he'd been embedded with the Bonanno family to write Honor Thy Father for 5 years. He goes, they are cool. So that was quite an experience.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you've just tuned into the start of this podcast, this is Professor Gordon Marino from St. Olaf College. I fucking love it. I love it. Do you know what I love about this, Gordon? Is that loads of times people have this idea that academics are sitting around in a jacket with leather patches, smoking a pipe, pontificating about stuff. But do you know what I've learned over the last number of years? That probably 8 out of 10 academics are either ex-druggies, pissheads, lunatics, been in jail, they've all got some, everything from like I was going to become a Tibetan Buddhist monk to I got out of prison and thought I had to change my life to I got stabbed and nearly died. That's probably 80% of people with PhDs. It's hilarious. It's so true.
Not a saying all, brother. Not a saying all. But you're right. There's more diversity there than you think.
I ended up having a similar kind of a scenario. It was the other way around. I was I kind of a realization one day when I first got into working security. I was only about 20, working security in a bar just kind of south of Boston. And I was only 20 myself, and I was doing doors on the nightclub, but I'm like 6'2" or 6'3", whatever. So I looked a bit older. And I remember I was just at the back door. I ended up breaking up this big fight and everything, and in the bar, being involved in breaking up this fight between these guys. This big guy had a big cross here on his neck and face tattoos and stuff, and he ended up getting skull dragged out the door by a colleague of mine who was a biker and was kind of able to deal with this guy. And then later on, this guy was like this, neo-Nazi looking fella basically, and came back to shoot the black guy that he had got a fight with. So like he comes back later on. I'm standing out at the back door holding a brush and pen, sweeping up some cigarette butts by where we were checking IDs just before we left. And next thing, this guy comes back and he pulls out this gun looking to shoot these lads. And I'm standing there holding a brush and pen. And I'm like, and it just fucking dawned on me then, just like, I'm a 20-year-old student standing here making $15 an hour. And I'm what the fuck am I doing with my life? I'm about to get shot here for $15 an hour with this fucking brush and pen in my hand. And it's like this realization way over my head.
What happened?
He shot him and he died. Kieran's dead. Kieran's been dead for 10 years.
The guy who had earlier that night kind of basically headlocked him and skull dragged him out the door. Just happened to come and grab me by the shoulder, like, I got this, man, don't worry about it. And ended up just walking out to him, cool as a breeze, and just talking to him and calming him down and managing to de-escalate the situation. But luckily, those black guys had left earlier on. And but it was just like I just remember all the illusions dissipated, all these illusions about being a tough guy and all this, all that just fell apart. I'm standing there holding a brush and pen, and there's a fella with a handgun in front of me looking to shoot people, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Like,
it's
and
amazing, it was just how many thoughts can swim around your head in such a short time, right?
Yeah. And I was just, so you reminded me of there when you said like this lucky escape of just this realization. Okay, we're on over our head here. But we might as well jump into, because Ian mentioned the academia thing and the kind of twisting paths that people can take to academia. Like from your book, which I have here, and I'd highly recommend to
it's brilliant.
Everyone. It's absolutely class.
Can I just say, Karen, before you go on, last week, listening to the audio book version of it, Gordon, within the first chapter, I had tears in my eyes, I was laughing, and I was shouting out, fucking yeah, like all within the first chapter. And I was like, I love this book. It's so good. It's really, really good.
Can I tell you a funny story about the book?
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody about this, but
okay, we'll hit pause.
I'm only kidding you. But so I've been a sprinter in terms of a writer, write a lot of essays and shit, right? For years, for good places and stuff. But I never thought I'd be able to be a miler. So I got this opportunity I was approached by Harper to write this book, and they offered me a sizable advance, and so I insisted it be six. I insisted it be six figures, like $100,001 I hope nobody from Harper listens to this, but I had no friggin' intention writing the book. Right, it was just an ego thing. So I'm serious, man. I didn't think I could do it. It was impossible. And my son's the editor in New York, and so months going by. I'm not doing shit on it, right? And he's going, Dad, you're gonna come through. You're gonna take the money back, and your reputation will be completely destroyed after this. And he finally got me to sit down and write something. But I had no I had no intention of writing a book. I just it was an ego thing. I just wanted, like, I just got a 6-figure, but
and yeah, so that's an interesting twist, because for that to have been the intention going into the project, but for you to have put together such a raw and insightful piece is surprising. For the intention to be, fuck this, I want an ego boost, to have provided such a raw piece of literature that's
raw. My son said, Dad, you can't put that you can't put that story in. You can't put this story in, like some criminal and some bad stuff. And so it was funny.
Because there was one, what was the one? Because there was one that I absolutely loved. It was, you only briefly touched on it at some point, where you mentioned a baseball bat breaking.
That was unbelievable. So I'm living in what was then Harlem with this woman who had some substance abuse issues, and I'm on the phone and a block over, and I was surrounded by a group of African Americans and I was the only white guy from blocks, right? And some people thought I was an undercover cop and all this shit, So they surrounded me, and I had a couple of beers, and I'm calling my ex-girlfriend, even though I'm with this other woman, right? Married, I think, maybe. Well, this is bad, man. This is bad. So they get around. They surround me, and I start saying some really nasty stuff, right? So I walk. They jumped me, and some kickboxer tried to kick me, and he hit me. So it was like nothing. I said, that didn't hurt. And I ran back to my street, right? And then I said, man, if you're going to live in this neighborhood, you gotta go back there and challenge this gang, right? So I go back there and I'm yelling all kinds of, unbelievable shit, saying, "Come out, motherfuckers! Come get me!" So finally, one guy comes out, and he comes running down the street with a big baseball bat aimed at my head, and swings the bat at my head, and the fucking thing. But it wasn't from boxing or anything. It was just, if I couldn't, like Kierkegaard has this thing where he says, you pray for a miracle, then the miracle comes, and then you go, "Oh, it was just a coincidence." But man, this breaking this big bat in half was pretty. The guy was, aimed right at my head, right in the middle, So that was.
Gee.
And then we got.
And what did you like? Put your arm up to block it or something?
I just put my arm up. But yeah. And then, okay, but here was an interesting thing, racially speaking. So then this kind of leader of the gang comes, and we had just an individual fight while everyone's surrounded. They got gangs surrounded me, and we're fighting. And at some point I just got him in a sleeper hold, and I'm a boxer, so I didn't. And I'm whispering in his ear, "I'm going to kill you, motherfucker," And the guy pulls out a gun and puts it in my head and says, "Let him go," and that was it. Now, if I'd been a black guy in an Italian neighborhood, they would have killed my ass in 2 seconds. We sat down on the curb, talked for a second. They pulled out a gun, said, "Let him go." I did, and but it was a real window into a different kind of racial. Right? You know what I mean? They could have. I'm telling you, like there's Boston. Boston's very ethnic, but there's places like Bensonhurst. If that had happened in Bensonhurst, and I was a black guy, you know what I mean? It wouldn't. I wouldn't have lived, So,
what a scenario!
Yeah, it was pretty.
Because that's the angle. Like, given the color in the book is unbelievable in terms of, like Ian said, that kind of, like Ian had alluded to, the kind of unexpected nature that some academics, but you in particular, the kind of pathway you lined out, but you didn't elaborate. Like, there was certain points that I'd love to pick your brain on a little bit more. There was, because your pathway in academia is fascinating because it's so unexpected. It kind of like, archetypally atypical for you to have, like that you didn't stay in college, you left, you you know, went through some obstacles, obviously very dramatic period, and then ended up coming back in. So would you be willing to kind of lay out kind of like from the kind of pathway that you ended up taking and how you ended up coming back to finish the PhD and to do the PhD? Because, in particular, the potential influence of Serge, was it that mentor that you had in kind of body?
I tried to. So I was at this place called Bowling Green State University, which is a Division I football place, and all I cared about was like a Labrador Retriever. I just loved playing football, and it was all I cared about was trying to make it to the NFL, and that didn't work out, and I transferred to the Ivy League. But this guy Serge, he was only like maybe 26 or so, and he said, and I took classes with him, and he said, what excellence is in athletics, to train like that, but you have no idea what it is. Excellence is in the intellectual life. You need to get to a place where people are going to challenge you, right? So between him and football, I was able to transfer to Columbia University, which is an Ivy League school, and I was extremely intimidated because I went in there and people knew how to sit still. They knew 2 languages, you know what I mean? It was just like, I saw the difference he was talking about. I mean, they were really good, strong academic backgrounds. And then I kind of, faded into this in order to feel safe or preserve my identity. I think I identify with getting into crime and the mob stuff and going boxing and that stuff. And, but I still was able to make it through the university. But in that context, I did encounter a woman whom I was, as I talk about in the book, she's walking by and, man, I don't know, have you ever been hit by somebody just the beauty just knocks you fucking cold. So she's walking by, she's high as hell, got these gimlet eyes, and I follow her into Baskin Robbins. I'm gonna marry you, and she said, "Fuck you, you're out of your mind." She was a Barnard student, and oh, lucky me, I ended up marrying her a couple of years later. Helped get her off heroin and stuff like that, and then after about 4 or 5 years, I was in graduate school, and she said, "I want to go back on heroin. I want to go back on drugs," and I never saw her again. And so I ended up in a mental institute for a couple of weeks, and I was gone, man, And but I wrote a piece called "The Long Conversation" about this therapist who I've been talking to since I've been 19, and she treated me for free and held my hand through that stuff. And I was lucky enough to have some good support from people, and I made it back. And then I married my current wife a couple of years later, and she's an angel. And but I did this growing up in a household with a lot of violence and fights all the time. In addition to love, there was a lot of philosophical questions that come up when you grow up in that kind of world, don't you think? You ask questions about what's going on, who's right, who's wrong. So I had a lot of curiosity about philosophy, and again, Serge was fun. And I really tried to. One of the things I have, I always talk to my students about. They're always obsessed with what they're going to do in life, their vocation, and I try to get them to think while they're in college about what kind of human being do you want to be. And people like Serge and this therapist who went that extra 3 miles with me have really made one of my goals in life is to be there for other people, as much as I can, and to be, and that doesn't mean like coming in with insights and shit, all that. It means being. That's one of the things about training boxers. You're there with them every day. You get to know them. You're consistent. It's not like you have bad days, you have good days, but that consistency, which many people don't have in their homes, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? One of the many people that have in their homes can be life-saving, And so I try to pass on the gifts that some generous people gave to me.
Gordon, you say about with the students, like talk about, which is that struck me in the book as well. Who do you want to be? What type of person, as opposed to what occupation? Yeah. And I think a lot of people identify with an occupation, and then when they lose that, then they don't understand who they are. I've seen people do that in business. They've been there for 20 years, to get made redundant and walk out the door, and it's like someone has absolutely just ripped the skin off their back. They don't even know who they are anymore. Do you find in the combat sports, because I do jiu-jitsu and I've done other martial arts, but predominantly is Brazilian jiu-jitsu is what I do now. And we often talk about when you train jiu-jitsu with people, you actually understand the true person, because in combat sports, there is nowhere to hide and it has to come out. And so you see person's character when they're under pressure, or, they're getting submitted, and I think it's the same in boxing as well. They mightn't be the best boxer, but you see their character coming through, their grit, or are they sneaky? Are they, what's their underlying true behavior? Do you think combat sports more generally is a way to uncover the true being of a person and the weaknesses of them?
Well, it depends on who's coaching you. I mean, I had coaches that were not good, didn't teach me anything, and just put me in there with people that were contenders and didn't teach. And so I think it certainly can be that. It can certainly develop your character. I don't think it automatically reveals it. It takes time to be grounded in one of those combat sports. One of the things I do find about the combat sports is, in philosophy, at least, we always talk about, and this goes back to Kant, which I'm sure you guys read this afternoon or something, but, there's a lot of emphasis on respect, but what's respect without a kind of affection, Like I've trained kids there's one Mexican kid I trained, and we went out to Wisconsin, in some small town out there, and the young kids, after the fight, they're out there in the parking lot hugging each other. There's an affection between them, a bond between them, And I'm sure, so I think that kind of more emotional tie is more important than this kind of, well, I respect your rights. That's fundamental. Yeah. That. But that we need to aim for something more powerful than that, right? More, and I think combat sports can deliver that sometimes.
Yeah, I think people think, like, on the outside that combat sports is just a bunch of thugs trying to kick the shit out of one another. But if you go into a boxing gym, MMA, jiu-jitsu, any of these places that are in the combat sports as opposed to traditional arts, I think it might look like that on the surface, but what's underneath is a family who's trying to kill each other in a respectful way. Like, it's really, there's a lot of camaraderie.
I've been in gyms that are just, I won't. So before I send somebody to take somebody to spar at a gym, I go to the gym, and you can't trust everybody. I've been in a lot of gyms. Yeah. They just throw people in there. People who've never boxed before, they might throw in with somebody. You know what I mean? And that's a bad experience.
I've seen some crazy shit in boxing gyms over the year that I'm often extremely hesitant when people ask me about joining boxing clubs and stuff, because I'm so wary of stuff that I've seen in situations that I've been in, where people are just put in situations where they're just getting their confidence destroyed or just getting actually hurt when no reason for it to happen. There's no need for this to happen. This isn't a learning opportunity. This is just like a lamb being chucked in with a shark when it doesn't need to happen. There's no one learning. There's no one gaining from this. It's just incompetent coaches with no respect for the craft itself. Like,
Ian, does that happen in jiu-jitsu as much, or probably not? Right?
It can do. I've actually I used to travel a lot for work, and I used to train jiu-jitsu around the world, and I've seen it happen in some places, but by and large, I can't compare it to boxing, but it does happen. I think what more happens in jiu-jitsu is that if a lower belt comes in and thinks he's a bit of a tough guy, he more kind of gets beaten down by the higher belts a bit in terms of submission. He just gets submitted over and over and over again. There's probably like an internal checking system that happens like that. But there is a few bad places, that where you go and people just want to, especially when I was like a white belt, blue belt, like I was lower down the ranks, people just wanted to like fucking mash you into the mat, like in wrestling. They just want to drive you into the mat. They just want to really hurt you, and I suppose, like everybody else, I've had my fair share of injuries over the time, and now being a bit older, I'm like, you can do it without doing that as well. You can teach someone a lesson. You guys know that as well from boxing. You can light someone up probably without really killing them. And so it's the same in jiu-jitsu as well. You can control someone's body and you can submit them without having to hurt them. So, but it does happen.
To touch on, you've mentioned it a few times already, but I'd love to get a definition of kind of terms, because philosophy to a lot of people which you've mentioned the word a few times. So I'd love if you could kind of
excuse me, I'm a philosophy professor.
Yeah, but specifically like to explain this Eiffel Tower thing. But if you could potentially touch on what philosophy is, and particularly like where you see the point of demarcation between, is there a kind of a point of demarcation there where we could draw a line?
Yeah. Well, clearly psychology wants to be more scientific. It's very, very much emphasizing the empirical today. In fact, the new piety is studies show this, studies show that, right? And so it's empirical, whereas philosophy is this mostly a level of wisdom. Now, what's happened is a lot of time it's a level of knowledge, which is different. There's wisdom is sophos, and knowledge is episteme in the Greek, and you should become a better person from it. That's the goal. But academic philosophy becomes very, very technical. Very much involved in pressing, asking basic questions, puzzles, kind of various puzzles. Things like if you're one famous example of is if you're in a situation where there's a trolley coming, and if you switch the tracks, you'll kill one person. If you don't, you'll kill six. What do you do? Those kinds of things. And so I think the mood of it a lot of times is this kind of like chess playing type of stuff, which I could never stand.
Yeah.
Or again, some philosophers are more like lawyers. You construct an argument for 6 months, and you try to cover every aspect. Try to make sure it's defensible, completely defensible. And it's a technical field too. Whereas existentialism, the area I focus on, has much more to do with the individual aspects of life. Kierkegaard, Sartre, Nietzsche. But
and with existentialism, how would you describe existentialism to someone who'd never heard of it? Existentialist philosophy writ large. How would you describe it to someone who'd never encountered it before, or any of the writers?
Yeah, that comes up a lot. They're really a kind of motley crew because, as I said in the book, some of them are believers like Kierkegaard. Nietzsche that calls himself the Antichrist. Some are novelists like Tolstoy or Dostoevsky. Others straightforward philosophers like Sartre. So it's a real motley crew, and it's more themes that unite them, namely a certain critique of the limits of reason, right? First person perspective, issues about what's the meaning of life for me, issues about choice, what it means to be an individual. So it's a certain spectrum of questions that certain kinds of philosophers just would shrug off as unanswerable and useless and taking up, right? So they say, well, it's not clear what an answer would be, so therefore it's a pseudo question. So in philosophy, there's a school called analytic philosophy, which is very much focused on the analysis of arguments, right? And so for the kind of questions that are on the menu for existential philosophers, they would say you can't answer these questions. They're just pseudo questions. Right?
You got to wrestle with them. There's no clear answer. Like the kind of the life enhancing component can potentially be in the wrestling with the unanswerable question. Kind of like you can't.
Yeah.
It's a kind of,
for example, good.
I was going to say, is this a kind of a, because is this a kind of a downstream? Because it looks like the kind of the existentialism is a kind of, so I suppose if I preface it, is that someone like I've read about, say, Isaiah Berlin once categorized the emphasis of the Enlightenment being on forms of knowledge that are a question isn't a question unless you can answer it. An answer isn't an answer unless you can actually understand it. And also you be able to transfer that information. So the problem with that is if you're focusing, if this is how he described the Enlightenment, I suppose when he was writing about the Romantic period, post-Enlightenment.
Yeah, I got that book. Yeah.
So if
very good.
Yeah.
Very clear.
So if the emphasis of the Enlightenment, which we're still obviously downstream of with the in this period at the moment with that, you know, the postmodern stuff going on and the rejection of truth and this hyper focus on lived experience, etc., at the expense of everything else, that it seems that if your emphasis is on only transferable knowledge, that becomes the kind of dominant cultural focus, then what's going on from a first person, as you described it, I think at one point in the book, like the first person coordinates of like the coordinates of like your from essentially experience from the inside out and what's going on and what does it feel to actually live. That then seems like a kind of a pushback against that hyper focus on transferable knowledge.
No, that's right.
Yes. As if like in Greek, you mentioned like episteme, but then there's like techne is also transferable knowledge, whereas something like gnosis, like acquaintance with the divine, you know, these experiences of these mystical religious experience, etc. Like that's a kind of a scenario like Plato's allegory of the cave, where you can't know there until you go there. So you can't transfer that knowledge. You have to have experience with something. Like there are things that it doesn't matter what we learn about sex or being in a fight or whatever, unless you've experienced it. It's almost like, you know, in German, there's different words like wissen and können, where wissen is kind of like a technical knowledge. You can you know about something, and then können is an embodied understanding, because I can have a wissen about New York, but if I've never been there, I can only have a wissen. But if I've been there, I can have a können about it, because I have an embodied feel for it. So I suppose it's kind of a roundabout way of asking, like, is it that with existentialism, because is it that it's a kind of an attempt to push back against this kind of like hyper rational, kind of like sequential, logical kind of take on being able to transfer? And is that basically, that's something, a question isn't worth asking unless you can transfer the answer to someone.
Right. Yeah. There's certainly again, notions about the limits of reason and critique of objectivity. Right. This fantasy that we can look at life from a perspectiveless perspective. That's one point that both Kierkegaard and Nietzsche certainly agree on, that's impossible. Although philosopher might say, well, that's an objective claim as well. But a good example, I think I mentioned in the book, is when Kierkegaard says, look, we know, he goes on for 2 pages, listing all these facts about death, but these objective facts don't tell me what death means to me.
Yeah.
The meaning of death, right? And that's what I talk about, this inside out perspective, this engagement, the questions about, you know, meaning, and the distinction between information and meaning. Like I see this in people's, like I try to talk about, and I do talk about this in the book a little bit, about the distinction between cause and meaning. Some people seem to imagine that because they might be able to talk about the neurological basis, the causes of certain ideas or experiences, that explains the meaning. It doesn't, right? The cause of I could say, look, the reason you said such and such was because you were drinking, but that doesn't address the meaning of what you said, right? And I think that's people tend to collapse those two things. And one of the there was a neuroscientist from South Africa who was started treating people with who had clearly organic brain diseases, right? I mean, ones that were, you know, there was no question about it, right? And but nobody ever talked to them about the meaning of their experience, right? Because they just said it's organic. Their psychotic ideas are just the product of neurochemistry, right? Well, he started to talk to him, and he said it was amazing how much less lonely they felt in the world when people addressed their experience, right? But these other folks seem to think, well, we know where it's, you know, those crazy ideas are just coming from your neurochemistry, you know? So I think there's a really important distinction between cause and meaning. And I don't think we think enough about the meaning of our life, the meaning of our experience. I think I said in the book that I had this kid who, you know, I teach Freud. I'm influenced by Freud a lot, or at least psychoanalysis. And after class, he comes up and says, as usual at the end of a class, well, I can't get my papers in because I have to get my drugs titrated, right? And he pulls out this handful of drugs, really, I mean, literally, you know. And I said, let me try something. No, but I said, well, is there anything going on in your life? He goes, My parents just got divorced, but I'm in my 20s, so that should make that's not a big deal. Well, that's ridiculous, right? You could be you're 22 or whatever, and your parents are getting divorced. That's a hurricane, man. You know, but this unwillingness to examine the meaning of our lives. This is pretty pandemic today. It's very easy. People don't want to think about it. It's painful stuff all the time. You know, and I also want to emphasize though that even as a so-called existential philosopher or something, I think it really is important to be able to, one of the things I really try to pass on to my students is the ability to give a person you might be arguing with their best argument. What is it, right? Their best argument, not to be able to tolerate a degree of that's a really important thing rather than attack some, you know, what they call a straw person, right? You know,
yeah.
So I think the ability, it does help you learn how to assess arguments or find out where. In fact, I used to play this kind of game with Trumpsters on, not a game, I did it in earnest on Twitter where I have some bouts. And when I get attacked by Trumpsters, a few of them might say, well, let's make a rule. Let's not be sarcastic, no nastiness, and let's see how far we can go with. And I'd often get 5 or 6 steps down the line and we'd say goodbye and that was fine. You know, we'd find out where our point, where we diverged and that there was nothing that was going to be able to adjudicate our differences, right? Especially in a world where no one trusts facts, right? You can't. When I was growing up, you could pull out a book or a newspaper or something and say, "Well, here's a fact that where'd you get that now?" You know, so this post-factual world we live in makes it much more difficult to do that.
And is speaking of the kind of post-factual world, is because it seems kind of like in a kind of timeline perspective, the existentialist kind of focus, like the late 19th century, early 20th century, this kind of helping to try and bring things back and rein things in a bit and focus from that first person coordinates of experiencing life from the inside out is, and as a kind of a pushback against the kind of hyper rational, ultra materialist kind of like reductionist, rationalistic take from the Enlightenment, is, when you mentioned there post-factual world, is something like the kind of it's hard to, just like the existentialists being a motley crew, the postmodernists are kind of a mixed motley crew as well. Is kind of, you know, like with postmodernism and this ultimate like kind of like dogmatic focus on something like lived experience and a total rejection of something like science or epistemology as but just another ideology that's just as invalid as any other ideology and they're all the same. That there's this hyper focus on, if I'm offended, then I'm offended and it means I'm right regardless of the facts. If I feel oppressed or if I feel something, then it must be true regardless of what's going on in the outside world, regardless of objective reality. So is postmodernism like a kind of existentialism taken to the nth degree with a total rejection of any narrative outside of first person coordinates? As I know it's hard.
I think that would be it's a pretty complicated question, and it paints with a pretty broad brush about postmodernism, right? That would be, and I haven't met anybody who would. Okay, so people who are, I say, well, the big thing right now is critical race theory, right? That's there's a lot of debate about that, and the claims about the connection between power and the way we understand ourselves and the narratives we tell ourselves, right? Which to some extent is certainly legitimate, something, right? Yeah. So there are questions with critical race theory, certainly who's controlling the narrative, right? Now, here's where things will get off track, I think, sometimes. If I were in a class and I actually teaching on race or something, and I mentioned that slavery was very much alive in Africa before Western Europe came there, right? And the people in Ghana were very much involved in the slave trade. And again, this is a caricature, but some fanatics would say, oh, here goes the white guy trying to excuse, trying to get out of the critique of Western culture, right? You're trying to change the subject, right? You're trying to change the subjects. It's a very common kind of Jiu Jitsu move that I see. Or when the Black Lives Matter movement came out, there were some people who were innocent, like Bernie Sanders, and says, well, all people matter. It's the white guy trying to dodge the question. Now, there may be something to that, but that's one of, I think, the illegitimate moves where you are, where there's not much room for discussion anymore.
Yeah. And that's what scares me. That's what scares me so much about a lot of the kind of critical theory, because to me the kind of critical theory based take on a lot of these on this race relation stuff is, it's essentially they're like it's dogmatism that you're not allowed to question, and that to me is extremely concerning, where to even raise a question means that you're automatically, there's like circular arguments set up.
But this is where
this kind of stuff.
Right. But here's where I want to stop this. Those would be like, those are people that are abusing the race theory, right? They're not the greatest spokesperson people of it, right? They're not the ones, because people that I know, they're very serious people that are very much influenced by Foucault, and that Foucault's an interesting case, but the connections between power and institutions and the way we understand ourselves, right? So, for example, in the United States, personal psychotherapy used to be very big. The insurance companies didn't want to reimburse for therapy, right? So Big Pharma came in and made therapy much quicker, and the vocabulary in which we think about our inner lives changed, right? So this connection between, which existentialism misses sometimes, is, what's to what extent is my way of thinking about my life influenced by external factors, right? So the student, right, because of changes in the insurance industry, he ends up thinking about his mental landscape in terms of neurons,
chemical imbalance,
vocabulary, chemical imbalance, which is a big
vocabulary.
But that's what I'm saying, is that we don't. So we would go with these. I'm critical of certain aspects of critical race theory. I don't leave it. I'm concerned about that it doesn't leave room for disagreement in certain areas, right? They just
I think.
But again, you don't want to create a caricature of it like they're all a bunch of maniacs.
I was just going to say on that topic as well. Leaving critical race theory aside for a moment, I think the challenge I see in the world is that any subject these days, you can't even have a discussion, and the word is a discussion. It's not even about, like what Kieran was saying, you get into these like circular arguments and people are kind of, you can see a trap being laid, or they've got a certain angle, or like what you were saying there, Gordon, as well, as about you're like defending slavery. But now if the problem is, it's not even about being shut down. It's the problem is you can't even have, the problem is that you're just getting shut down. We can't even have an open discussion, because if I'm at fault or I'm thinking another group is at fault, how can we learn? How can we grow unless we have those discussions? And across all subjects, that's happening. That's happening in business now as well. People just shut you down like straight away for, because I work as a scientist and as a scientific consultant, and I often present data and I'm like, this is what's happening. No, you don't understand. You've never been here. I'm like, no, I'm not saying that. I understand that there's a feeling part of it. That's why I'm presenting the data, to understand what you make of it. And people are just shutting you down. And it's in every aspect of the world today. And that's what really kind of, number one, worries me, but also fucking shits me. Because I'm like, can you at least let me talk for 2 minutes before you shut me down? Because you'll end up doing the same thing that you're giving out about.
Maybe we got to work harder at trying to create those discussions. I mean, some people it's impossible with, right? I mean, there's no doubt about that. They just, there's a lot of people, at least with, I know amongst the Trumpsters, they're just obsessed with autonomy and no one's going to tell me what to do, that kind of baby stuff, and some of them it's just impossible to talk with. But on the other hand, we got to keep trying. Like, I know so many people today that say, I don't listen to the news, it's too upsetting. I'm talking about people that are educated. It's just too upsetting. It's so all advocacy journalism. Well, how can you live in a democracy? I mean, in a democracy, you got to make certain choices, and if you don't listen to, if you don't try to find out what's going on, how are you going to make any kind of informed choice? It's all over, you know. But so I think, and especially as all of us here have been involved in combat arts, sometimes we got to figure out a different move rather than.
Yeah.
And sometimes when people shut you down, you got to call them on it. Come on, stop! You know, you shut me down. Or a lot of times, I find it useful. You probably heard of this. You know, Popper's claim that something isn't a science unless it's falsifiable, right? Unless you come up with a criteria by which you could say this theory is false. And I've often found it helpful in certain discussions to ask, what's the criterion by which we're going to, you know, what would prove to you that such and such a view is false? The person says nothing, then you can say, well, really, there isn't much room for conversation, right?
Yeah.
But I found that a useful,
lay the rules of engagement straight away. You can get a feel for someone's epistemology right from the outset. Like, what is it that what is their argument based on? And you can get that feel by asking, okay, well, what are the rules of engagement here in terms of what would get either of us to change our mind in this situation?
Yeah. Ask yourself how many times you've changed your mind over your lifetime. Everyone goes, I'm open-minded. And you ask them, well, what was the last time you changed your mind about something? They can't come up with anything. You know, for example, most of my boxers that I train are Mexican, undocumented Mexican immigrants here, and they're like, I mean, I love them, man. They're family to me. I mean, they've opened their lives to me in ways that I cherish. But it's true that the immigrant population has driven wages down. You know, that press been a strain on public resources, that kind of thing. I mean, I'm still fighting for them all the way. But I don't you think the ability to tolerate some degree of cognitive dissonance is important?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
100%. Yeah.
You know, like if you can't tolerate cognitive dissonance, and I think it's a theory that, you know, from Lewis, Festinger, I'm sorry, that was it's been criticized a lot, but I just think it's so important to be able to, you know, like, this guy's an asshole, but he's got a point, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and that's something I try to cultivate in my students. And that's something from Nietzsche. Nietzsche was, not to give you a fucking philosophical lecture.
We want this. This is the goal. This is the Learning to Die podcast. We want philosophy.
Back to the mob stuff, right?
No.
I wanted to.
So what did you say? You said Nietzsche was in the mob. This is a very interesting story.
I actually have some questions I want to ask you about Nietzsche in a minute. I have some questions I want to ask you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and then okay, let me get. Okay, so he was. What's another piety today is being non-binary, and Nietzsche had this was Superman at that stuff. I mean, so he'll talk about the slave revolt, the Christianity, and the dominance of this ascetic idea where nothing's good unless it involves self-denial, right? And he'll critique it in the most beautiful, refreshing ways, and then he'll say, but at the same time, we wouldn't have Dostoevsky if this didn't happen, right? And he does this over and over again when you read Nietzsche. He'll say, so-and-so, such and such is poison, but, right? That he says this, so the question for him is what's good or bad for life, right? And he thinks it's a mixed bag a lot of time, you know, rather than, and so all his writing is, he does that. And really, I think that's an important attribute, important ability.
Yeah, that actually relates to one of the points I wanted to actually get your thoughts on. It's one of my favorite sections of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. So he says, I'd like to get your thoughts on these few lines. He says, but it is with man as it is with the tree. The more he aspires to the height and light, the more strongly do his roots strive earthward, downward, into the dark, the deep, into evil.
Yeah, that I'm not. Zarathustra is not one of my favorite books, and it's also not one I know the best. But that theme comes up a lot with him, with this idea that with every higher virtue, there's a corresponding vice. Like if you look at Spartan training with kids, right? I mean, they were fucking maniacs, right? I mean, you were a weak 4-year-old, they'd throw you off the freaking cliff.
Yeah.
But they had no compassion, were corrupt, right? So the other side of that emphasis on manly strength or whatever, right, was this lack of compassion, right? So Nietzsche sees that a lot with this striving, and he would also say this, a lot of the striving for, in that particular passage is down beneath is the will to power, right? Right, the will to power. How about this quote? Here's Nietzsche, though. Here's a beautiful quote for you. The truth is a mobile army of metaphors. So there he's saying that, isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
And what's funny about Nietzsche, I mean, he's such a lyrical writer, but if you read his poetry, it's absolute dreck. It's shit. And it's funny how some of them could be so lyrical. The truth is a mobile army of metaphors that what we have are warring descriptions. No, it's not going to be, things aren't going to be reasoned out in some deductive argument, right?
Yeah,
the
map and the territory are different things. Like there's always limitation to language. Language is there's an inherent vapidness to language. Like it can't capture reality as it actually is. You know, like no matter how good.
He said that. Yeah. He said all we can do. Also, that's a sense in which you could call someone in Nietzsche a skeptic. There's no objective truths. All we can have are all these different perspectives, and he thought we ought to multiply as many perspectives as we can. You know, that was important. You know, so. So he's a perspectivalist, he'd say.
Yeah.
You got a quiz next week, guys. You better study up, man.
Yeah, I know. and out of there's actually one other one of my favorite passages from Becker, you know, The Denial of Death.
That was a brave book, man. And you know the story behind that? Did you read the preface to that book where he calls up the editor of Psychology Today and says, "Look, I'm dying and I want to find out whether or not."
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Because he's so obsessed with thinking that the fear of death is the prime mover behind all our thinking. And he's dying at an early age and he calls up the editor. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no. And I think the editor actually, or the journalist from Psychology Today actually, I watched an interview with him that was done afterwards. There's an interview on YouTube available, and he describes what it was like to be in the be at the kind of bedside chatting to Becker to do the interview, because they ended up doing an interview with Becker as he was on his deathbed about what it was like to be dying, given the fact that he's after writing this book and he's all his whole body of work about it. It's fascinating, and the writer, if I remember correctly, gets very emotional about what it was like to be in that situation. Talking to him, it was fascinating.
Did he know him before that, or was that their first contact?
I don't think they knew him. I don't think so either. Yeah. I don't think so.
He's a brave, beautiful thinker.
Yeah, and there's actually a bridge I wanted to go from. There's one passage I'd like to read here and get your thoughts on it, because then what I wanted to do after that was bridge to Kierkegaard from Becker, because Kierkegaard had such an influence on him.
Yeah.
So where's the line here that I want to get? Second to last. Here we go. So he says, this is right towards the end, he said, "What are we to make of a creation in which the routine activity is for organisms to be tearing others apart with teeth of all types, biting, grinding flesh, plant stalks, bones between molars, pushing the pulp greedily down the gullet with delight, incorporating its essence into one's own organization, and then excreting with foul stench and gases the residue? Everyone reaching out to incorporate others who are edible to him. The mosquitoes bloating themselves on blood, the maggots, the killer bees attacking with a fury and demonism, sharks continuing to tear and swallow while their own innards are being torn out, not to mention the daily dismemberment and slaughter in natural accidents of all types. An earthquake buries alive 70,000 bodies in Peru. Automobiles making a pyramid heap of over 50,000 a year in the US alone. A tidal wave crashes over 250,000 in the Indian Ocean. Creation is a nightmare spectacular taking place on a planet that has been soaked for hundreds of millions of years in the blood of all its creatures. The soberest conclusion that we could make about what has actually been taking place on the planet for about 3 billion years is that it is being turned into a vast pit of fertilizer. But the sun distracts our attention, always baking the blood dry, making things grow over it, and with its warmth, giving the hope that comes with the organism's comfort and expansiveness. Comes to mind when you hear that ferocious passage being read.
Yeah, but also there's tenderness at the end too, right? With the sun, the images. How does it begin the passage? So what's the first line? What are we to
make of a creation in which the routine activity? So that's only part of the way into that starts a few lines into another paragraph, but he's actually in a section where he's talking about kind of towards the end the reconciliation of science and religion and the kind of the limitations of because a rational take on life, given what he just read, doesn't end in comfort and expansiveness. I suppose he's kind of reconciling the rational and the irrational to a large extent in that passage.
But what about could you just read the last line about the sun though?
Oh yeah. But the sun distracts our attention, always baking the blood dry, making things grow over it, and with its warmth, giving the hope that comes with the organism's comfort and expansiveness.
So it's almost as though he's saying that despite the fact that we live in a harrowing machine, that life is, we can't help but hope. Hope is there, right? But it does seem there is a hint there at the end that the hope is just the sun is just a distraction, and it's not a rational hope, right? But that along with this ferocious war of all against all, there is this hope.
Yeah. And that's this is what I love, because with Becker, he's very critical in this as well about the Enlightenment hyper focus on the logical. If it's not logical, it's worthless. But you take someone like Plato, and he'll say, look, the evil comes from there's in between it's fascinating. Some of these great philosophers, it's in between the line that you get the most wisdom. So here's a line, I forget which dialogue said that the real source of all evils is laziness. And it will be very convenient for those of us who don't particularly enjoy going through arguments to dismiss logic or to ignore its importance. And there's a really important place for it, 100%. But when it's taken to it's when it's held up on a pedestal above everything. It's when because there isn't, I suppose, like logic can't even justify itself. Whereas I'm all about logic and rationality.
What's that mean? Logic can't justify itself.
As in,
you can't give a logical argument for logic.
Yeah, as in, I suppose there needs to be even a subjective preference. Because I'm all about logic in terms of like philosophy of science and epistemology, but there isn't a scientific justification I could give for why existence is better than non-existence. There's a subjective preference claim in there.
Oh yeah,
that
sure.
Is preferable.
Sure, okay. Let me slow down. Let's be Socratic here. But no one's claiming that what scientist is claiming that you could make that answer that kind of a question on a scientific basis. I don't know.
I was only given a kind of a rather kind of extreme example just to kind of highlight that there's kind of an initial, I suppose, do you know who explained this really well was Ian McGilchrist. He wrote this lovely book. Dr. Ian McGilchrist is a psychiatrist based in Scotland. He wrote this book, The Master and His Emissary. And in it, in the Enlightenment chapter, he described the difference in between the Greek logos and the Greek nous, N-O-U-S. And he basically used a kind of an Aristotelian thing where kind of nous is kind of the reason. Nous is kind of grasped from inductive kind of reasoning. And it's not, there isn't kind of a logical reason for grasping nous, but once you're in it and and the ball is kicked off, now logic is an unbelievably useful tool, but I suppose is that logic by itself is just, it's an amoral, there's nothing to it unless you're pointing it at something, unless you choose to think that it's useful. And then we're off to the races once you make that leap. So that's what I mean by it can't justify itself. Not that it's not useful, of course it is, but it's that without a recognition that it is useful, we can't use it. Yeah, I suppose I don't know if I'm explaining it very well. He explained it a lot better.
What would you say to someone, you give them a logical argument about something, I don't know, something, concrete or whatever, and they go, well, I don't like logic.
Yeah,
logic,
I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't know what to do.
Where's it discuss? I mean, logic is the form of thought. We can't have conversations if we don't if we don't if we don't recognize certain forms of argument as reasonable and others as not.
Yeah.
So
the example I gave, I actually wrote about this a few years ago, and the example I gave, just to kind of, it was somewhat tongue in cheek, it was about it was a series of essays about the philosophy of science, and in one of them was about a kind of people who have this rejection of science and a rejection of knowledge gained about nature through the scientific method, that by rights they need to give up the utilization of their Google Maps or their GPS, because of the only reason that even works and that allows them to actually get somewhere is because Einstein's general relativity, apart from all the other stuff, allows the correction of time in space where the satellites are, because the time moves differently because gravity is different where the satellites are. So it's like there's a kind of like a, but I suppose
so you're saying they would be inconsistent, but if they don't care that much about logic, that's not gonna okay. So but we want to distinguish between inductive logic and deductive logic, and that was one of Aristotle's great amazing contributions. I think he must have been from outer space or something. He's unbelievable. But and there's no one of the areas in philosophy the deductive arguments, if the form of the argument is correct, the truth of the premises guarantees the truth of the conclusion. We don't have anything analogous to that with inductive logic and science. So there's been a lot of effort spent by philosophers in the 20th century trying to come up with a logic of induction, right? I mean, you could have, you could say, well, I've seen 1,000 white swans, therefore all swans must be white, and then see a black swan, right? There would be no logical contradiction. So I want to distinguish between inductive and deductive logic, I think. But I wouldn't, going back, wait a second, what was a link you were going to make with Kierkegaard with that very powerful passage from?
Oh, just that Becker is an very interesting character, like for loads of reasons. But like, for example, he opens the beginning of the book even with a quote from Spinoza, and then Kierkegaard, and we actually chat to the biographer for the upcoming biography on Becker on this podcast, and according to him, like Kierkegaard was this kind of the kind of such interest to him, because Kierkegaard wasn't, he kind of embodied the struggle between the rational and the irrational, the logic, the kind of the mystic, the ineffable, the literally the leap of faith. Because Becker, even at the very end, I can even give you a kind of the very last lines of the book. He says, "Who knows what form the forward momentum in life will take in the time ahead, or what use it will make of our anguished searching. The most that any of us can seem to do is to fashion something, an object or ourselves, and drop it into the confusion, make an offering of it, so to speak, to the life force." Where in the book, Becker kind of, he contrasts to a large extent Freud versus Kierkegaard, and kind of essentially goes to, oh well, if that there's
Otto Rank is one of his main men.
Yeah.
And and I tried reading Rank's book on heroes, and I didn't find it very compelling. But yeah, he's got Ronk in there too.
Yeah,
it's a hard, I'll tell you, it's a hard book to teach. It's not all that clear some places. It's very insightful, right? All kinds of epiphanies, but really a hard book to wrap your head around in some ways. You know? I mean, I wouldn't want to have to write a summary of it, and I love it. I mean, but for the reason passages like you read, but this claim about the fear of death being elemental, right? That's a leitmotif there, and foundational.
And the fascinating thing, when we mentioned there about the philosophy and psychology earlier on, what's fascinating, just sorry, Darian, was
all right.
You mentioned there, like the philosophy is kind of like the more scientific take on the evidence. What's really fascinating with Becker was the work that's been done over the last few decades with terror management theory, the research psychology field that's gone into exploring the role of death anxiety in the human condition, I think at last, according to our last conversation, I think there's more than 1,000 studies being done across loads of cultures all over the world, and using really interesting study design to explore the role of death anxiety on like culture and on cultural affirmations, etc. And it's fascinating to see this piece of work from the 1970s, and then 15 odd years, or 10, I think it was about a decade after Becker passed away, then terror management theory was founded by three researchers like Sheldon Solomon and Pizzinski and Greenberg, and then for it to spawn this huge body of knowledge and supporting his ideas is fascinating in the realm of research psychology. So like these philosophical ideas being now supported by this huge body of evidence, essentially, is a fascinating scenario.
My wife's a neuroscientist, and I'm always inclined to show me the study. You know, I mean, and really encouraging students to be able to look at studies critically, because one of the things, don't you think some of the most important things in life, like intimacy, love, all kinds of issues, you can't operationally define them. It'd be impossible to think of a way you could develop a controlled study to test them. And yet there's all these people that say, oh, studies show that, I mean, Jordan Peterson does a lot of that shit. Oh, it's been shown by science that blah, blah, blah. You know, well, I looked up some of the studies and they're highly questionable. So one of the reasons we might say there's limits to science is because it seems like some of those important questions in life, how to live, what's love, those things can't be, you can't design it. I can't even imagine operationally defining them and design an experiment which had a control group, and you know what I mean? I mean, the gold standard for science is a controlled experiment, right? And so that's very tough to do with some of our most meaningful, the most poignant questions we have about life. You know,
I think a lot of the kind of studies that were done in terror management theory, there was a really good book that's a kind of a summary of it that was published in 2015 called it actually uses, it's based on something William James said, where he described the awareness of death as the worm at the core of the human condition.
Yeah, I know that. James is unbelievable, man. James is unbelievable.
Poet as well. And the way that they kind of set up some of the studies that they describe in the book, for example, and when we look into the TMT literature, we're very interested in that they'd have essentially like subliminal flashes of the word death for some subjects.
Oh yeah, I know P-scope stuff. They'll
do that. They do that kind of thing, and then they'll have kind of various like elements on like rating that have Christians rate the threat of Islamic terrorism, or Muslims rate what Israelis are doing, etc., based on these interventions. And so it's been quite intriguing to explore, because the worry about it, which the terror management, I suppose, the people involved with Becker and terror management theory would acknowledge, is that it ends up becoming almost too good to be true, because, and they acknowledge this themselves, that it kind of comes back on top of itself, almost like Freud would bring things back to sexuality. Just basically, that was his model. And
we know from the movies and porno that Freud was completely crazy about the importance of sex, right? I always get a kick out of that. Oh, we overestimated sex too much. Get some figures on pornography. Every movie's got to have sex and murder in it, man. But Freud was such a dummy. It just yeah.
I never thought of it like that. Actually, that's a good way of thinking about it.
But the terror management theory people would say the same kind of thing, that even like worries they have is because it ends up kind of like being almost, it ends up coming across as a kind of a unified theory of psychology or something. Because
what does that? I'm sorry, what does that?
Terror management theory is that you've heard some. This is the field of research psychology that's exploring Becker's ideas. Anxiety is that even worries that I've heard researchers in that field like Sheldon Solomon voice is that the danger with it is that because there's all this evidence that they've been able to find, basically exploring the role of death anxiety on all sorts, political views and cultural kind of affirmations, that it ends up, the danger is that it ends up becoming like an all-encompassing explanation.
Okay,
and
gotcha.
And that's what they're worried about as well, that they don't want to make it seem like they're not trying to make that the case. They're just trying to explore interesting questions,
Yeah, that's what you mean, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, Karen, there earlier on, I found actually with Gordon's book, there was a lot of richness around. When I listened to Gordon's book on Audible, it was elements of like, in my head, it was like, this is like Stoicism version 2. This is elements of Buddhism. This is elements of Becker's work. When I listened to your book, Gordon, where it was like, you had those moments where you spoke about reflection on death in the future, or you had this very emotional passage about lying in bed with your wife and she was shaking at night, and then you would turn away kind of and then go, oh wait, now this moment will be kind of gone in the future. This is all going to kind of end. And actually last night, I remember like sitting on the couch last night and I looked at my wife, we were watching the show and we were laughing. I was thinking, fuck, this is going to end as well. Again, it's one of those other things that this will all end, and we get caught up in the bullshit of day to day, and like we said at the start of the podcast, we get kind of hung up on what job we want, what profession. But like you said, who do we want to be as a person? Like, where are we going? But then there's all these kind of little magic moments along the way that actually make life, because you won't be lying on your deathbed going, oh yeah, I should have updated that spreadsheet before I got sick. You'll be thinking about all the good things that happen. And for me, your book, based upon existentialism and your experiences, really tie a lot of those things together for me. But also made me think more about, in the broader context in the world, and you said about coronavirus earlier on, there seems to be this even more of a denial of death at the moment. There's this, what I call immortality complex. When I talk to people about coronavirus or their health issues, people act as if they're going to fucking live forever.
Oh yeah,
it's really bizarre. And the more I have these conversations with people like yourself, or read Becker's work, or read more things, the more I actually think people are walking around delusional. They might as well walk around with a box on their head, because they just don't want to acknowledge the fact that someday they're going to go into that hole. It's weird. And I find that actually, the more I talk about it, the more richer my life is becoming. The more I focus on that, the more I go, fuck man, today is awesome. I don't care if I'm tired, if I have a bit of a cold, or, I got a sore hip. I'm fucking upright. I'm moving. Let's do something.
Yeah,
it's really helping me live a better life.
I'm not underground or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of, intellectual interest in death. I remember, like, when I was 35 or so, I loved thinking about it and all this shit, We'll find out that's what Becker was saying to himself, right? We'll find out what you really think. The doctor comes in and says, you got a couple of days to live. That'll be the exam. Then we'll really know what we think, because it's very interesting. People love to, and I accuse a lot of my writings when I was in grad school were about that. And I loved playing with the idea. Yeah. I didn't know a fucking thing about it, man. At that time, I didn't know contact with it, and I was thinking, like, sometimes with the illness, my wife's illness, I get irritable and shit, and and then I think, well, how you gonna feel when she's not there? We have these emotions that I don't like. I remember I took care of my mother when she was for years, when she was 6, and there were times I wanted to push her down the fucking. She'd be in a wheelchair. I'm like. We'd be over a hill, and I'm like, I'm gonna let this fucker go. So it's funny. I was thinking, I've always wondered whether you'd really want young people to know what's like, you get married when you're young, it's and sickness and in health, all that shit, like, and you don't have any idea what sickness is, right? Or I always think like, wouldn't it make you old to make you skip over your youth if you really appropriated what was coming down the pike, man? I don't know, but you're right. It should make us, and it's not a matter of, I mean, for Silver Kierkegaard, the text, you guys might enjoy it. I don't think Becker cites this as at a graveside, where he says that become aware of your own mortality in this personal way. Should make the moment give infinite significance to finite things, right? Like you don't know, and but not in the sense of take time to smell the flowers, but be a good person. Like I don't want to, like in the book I said, my brother and I didn't talk to each other for 9 years, and he was my soul brother as well as my flesh and blood brother. What a waste of we must have thought we were going to live forever, So that kind of thing. So death can wake us up morally, Okay, in the sense of don't let shit, don't hang on to stuff that you fuck up with someone, make up. You know what I mean? As opposed to, well, I need to try and be in the present moment, that kind of shit, and enjoy things, whatever. I mean that's true, but I think it has moral significance. So I'd highly recommend this discourse at a graveside. Actually, I'll send you the text because I got it a PDF of it. It's beautiful. It's really that it should, an awareness of it should make us more earnest, more serious about life, not in a overly somber way, but about what kind of human beings we are.
Yeah, I think people often can misconstrue it and think that you're being morbid. You got some sort of fascination with the dark arts, and you're listening to Alice Cooper, and you're like practicing Satanism at home. Right. It's like, no. It's like it actually helps me live because, we go to bed at night. Like I'm a sleep scientist, and we go to bed. We still don't truly know what the function of sleep is, right, from a scientific point of view. But you go to bed, and like if you look at it in Tibetan Buddhism or in other religions, it's often thought about like it's a practice for death, like sleep is, right?
Yeah.
And so you wake up in the morning. It's kind of like, because where does your conscience go? We go to a whole debate about where does your consciousness go when you're asleep, and when you wake up next morning, you're truly the same person you were the day before, and so on. But you wake up, and the fact that we do actually close our eyes and we wake up next morning is a fucking miracle in itself, And that happens every day over and over again, that no one eats us or kills us overnight. For the vast majority of us, some people get killed in their sleep and some people die. And maybe some people do get eaten in their sleep. But for me and, nice suburb I live here in Western Australia, there's not too many people come and try to eat me, saying that someone will probably try and fucking eat me tonight. So, I think we have to reflect that in the world. It's pretty good that we can get up and put one foot in front of the other. Like this morning, getting up at 5:30 to do this podcast, as much as like no one likes getting up at 5:30, I still got up with a smile on my face going, oh, I get to have a good chat like straight away. It's a good start to the day, Like you can look for the good in everything,
Well, at least that's true. I'm certainly not one of those people. I'm one of these the glass is a quarter filled, but there's too much fucking wine in them. At least in my world, there's too much whining with people about, fucking look at Yemen, look at what's going on. I understand these people heart-rending stuff, and so I try to help at least their mama keep me from whining about shit. And as you say, like, bad things happen, they're going to happen. We're not.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're surprised you're 80 and you're got whatever, So I do find it helpful in not being a big baby.
I think you're right about that. Like I left school early, like in my last year of school, and joined the military. I did 5 years in the military, and within a year, I was like in the Middle East looking for landmines. thinking I was cool, smoking a cigarette, sunglasses on. Yeah. Look, and I was cool. Like if anybody wants to know, I was fucking really cool. But anyway, but like within a year, I was like, and then you're doing this, you're like, oh fuck, maybe I should have went to university instead. You kind of go on, and you have that reflection. But on the other hand, too, Gordon, it was an invaluable start to my life because, looking at what was going on there in the middle of like between Israel and Lebanon at that age, at like 19, I was like, oh man, this place is fucked. Like it's even more fucked than the Irish Catholic and Protestant thing, but it's. And you just kind of have these, you start looking at things and you look at what people have, what people don't have. And then you come home and you're like, wow, we have a really good, or, then I traveled like working with mining companies as well, and sort of you'd see all these different places in Africa, or
Congo's, we wouldn't have cell phones without the Congo, and the Congo's like a slave colony right now, right? I mean,
yeah. So it's always kind of like, the like what Nietzsche was saying, the good and the bad, and the routes to hell, but it's all this kind of craziness across the world that makes you really appreciate what you have. And like, I remember being in South Africa, and I was staying in this hotel, and I was sitting up at the bar. It was like a Tuesday night, and there was nobody around. I was talking to the guy behind the bar and the waiter guy, and we're just like shy talking. And I said, I want to get some food. And I said, like, what's a local dish? And they said, oh, you wouldn't like it. I said, no, tell the chef like to make me something that you would eat on a Saturday night before you go out and get drunk, like a good stodgy, like an Irish stew type of thing. So anyway, they brought this feed and this kind of maize thing and this kind of stew, and we were talking away. And then the guy goes to me, we're talking about differences in culture. And he said, yeah, but it's different. He says, like, for you guys in Australia, when you leave school, he goes, the government gives you a house and gives you money. And I was like, what?
Yeah, right.
And I was going, what? Who the fuck told you that? But the more I thought about Gordon, the more actually it was right, because there is socialized housing and you do get a dole check. So I was like, actually, you're right. We actually do get a lot of stuff, even if you come out of school and you can't work. You do get a lot of actual, help from the government where your tax money does help. And he was saying, like, because he was living in basically a house that was like 12 foot by 10 foot. Him and his mother and his dad and his brothers and sisters, and he was working to make money to support his older brother to go to university. Right. But then when his brother would finish, it would be his turn. And they had this kind of internal co-op system going. And I was like, I thought it was hard working and trying to do my undergrad full. I was working full time and doing my undergrad part time. And I was like, oh, look at me, I'm a fucking hero doing that, online. And this guy's running around working 50, 60 hours a week, living in this 10 by 12 house.
Self-sacrificing, right? That's a beautiful thing, man. That's inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I think for all of these things actually really, I think will help us live a better life by looking at these other things, which I think you get from the news as well. Like, I'm not a fan of the news either, but, well, let me put that in context. I don't like turn on the news to see about, some socialite who's fallen over and broken her heel and her dog has fallen out of the purse. I couldn't give a fuck about that. But I do want to know about what's happening in Yemen, for example.
Yeah. I agree with 100%. No, that's good. Yeah.
Could I ask Gordon, why out of all of the philosophers that you could have, and you did write about this, but just for you to elaborate for anyone who hasn't read the book yet, why Kierkegaard as your main man over any other philosopher that you could have dedicated so much time to? Why Kierkegaard?
Thanks for that. That's a good question. And it's funny because having studied him for now 35 years or whatever, it's like having a personal relationship. You have your ups and downs. Like sometimes for a couple of years, I was all pissed off at him because he didn't seem to care much about economic injustice. But what attracted me to Kierkegaard was when I was going through this divorce. He helped me make sense of suffering. He helped me how he got me to believe that being able to negotiate psychological suffering was an action and it could be done with dignity, right? Which is a weird kind of, that it wasn't just this passive, because when you're going through psychological problems, you just feel like a stench. You just feel like so much self-hatred and everything. And he made me, helped me to believe that it could be done with dignity, and that was important. But also the recognition of it's easy to be. I mentioned this a lot, but sometimes when you talk about things too much, it becomes like memorized, and I get worried about it. But you can't be a good person, a loving person in this world, unless you can deal with anxiety and depression and bad feelings, hatred, rage. I mean, jealousy. Jealousy is like, so there's these internal impediments to being a good human being. And Kierkegaard directly addressed that in ways that other thinkers didn't, And I think that's really important. It's like when all you get are green lights and everything's going cool. If it's not easy, if you can't be generous then, man, you're really fucked up, right? But what happens when horrible things happen, and be able to reach through pain and be a loving person. So that's what attracted me to him. And he also made me take faith seriously in a way that I didn't. You know, I mean, so recognizing that you're not going to get there by a syllogism, right? That it's a leap. That it's a. He actually never used the phrase exactly. That it's a. You know, it's a. And from him, I got the idea that it's a matter of. It's not a matter of a. Kind of a belief, of more which you can't choose, right? I can't choose what to believe, but a matter of trying to trust. Trust, not. I check this off to be, I believe X, Y, and Z. But rather, kind of a personal trust, and that's helped me. I say my prayers at night and try to hold on to God and stuff, and so yeah, those things are really important. And a couple other things. I do want to emphasize that these existentialists were not. People like Kierkegaard did not emphasize experience a lot. That wasn't a big issue for him, right? He wasn't like, you got to go out and experience stuff. He was like, he said, I don't, and he has arguments. There's not like he's against arguing. A lot of his arguments are oblique. They're kind of a lot of them are what you call reductio ad absurdum. He goes, well, if you think this, then this must follow, right? So it's not as though he's against argument, even though he sees the limits of reason, right? He also has this belief that if, say, being wise or good was a matter of being smart, then rich and cultured people would have an advantage, and God wouldn't create a world in which, you had to get your PhD in order to get into heaven. So this notion of kind of goodness as being, or capacity for goodness being universally accessible, So those are things that really attracted me to him. And he writes like an angel, a lot of time.
Yeah, it's beautiful writing. And where would you, for someone who'd never read Kierkegaard, where would you advise someone to start if they were like, obviously it's going to be relative to the person, but let's say if someone had read other existentialists, they'd read some Nietzsche, or they'd read, where would you advise someone to jump into Kierkegaard?
Sickness on a death, and just don't get put off by the first page. Right? Don't get the first page. He fucks with you a little bit. It makes it sound like there's no way I'll ever understand this guy. And that's one that Becker certainly brings up quite a bit. And in there, I find this distinction between despair and depression, which I think we've lost. Despair being this kind of hopelessness about what kind of human being you're going to be, either because you've been so successful, you're so down, but whereas depression is this feeling. So I think that's really useful to people.
How would you draw that line again between
despair and depression?
Yeah.
Okay, so depression is just feeling down, self-hatred. Whereas for Kierkegaard, despair is to really forget that you're a self, to forget that you're a spirit, to you just give that whole project up. It doesn't have any meaning for you anymore, right? So he thought you could, right? So he said, he says, the person who says either Caesar or nothing can't stand to be himself when he doesn't become Caesar. He wants to be rid of himself, right? And the person who becomes very successful forgets about the true project in life is to become this certain kind of human being, a loving human being, right? Because everyone's patting him or her on the back. You're a big shot, right? So it's to despair is to forget that you're a self, what you like to think. So someone who thought I'm here to be on the beach or whatever, And he says so both depression, being in a funk and being super successful can both obscure your true task in life, which is to become a loving human being, right? To forget that you're a self. And so I think, and also in that book, there's a lot on self-deception. For Kierkegaard, again, I gotta hate that. Morality is more about being a good human being is more of a matter of not talking yourselves out of difficult truths than it is acquiring knowledge, right? So I find out, suppose you're a cop and your partner of 20 years commits an act of police brutality, and you have to decide whether or not to turn your buddy in. If you do, it's all over, right? So Kierkegaard thinks in those cases, what we do is we'll say, well, I better sleep on this one. And then by the time we're done sleeping, we come up with, it wasn't really, we talk ourselves out of difficult moral choices.
Yeah.
That's the biggest danger in life, is that we convince ourselves. And that's why he says, another reason why he says awareness of death is so important, because it makes you set priorities. It makes you realize that procrastination is so dangerous, moral procrastination, right? So when he says, when there's something, a really difficult choice you have to make, as soon as you know what the right thing to do is do it, because otherwise you're going to talk yourself out of it, right? And I try to teach my students that, I don't know with you guys, but I've been at moral crossroads. They just fucking jump out of the closet sometimes, right? It's not like they go, oh, you better get ready, I'm coming down the street, right? Right? They're there all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And to kind of train yourself to be, this is what I want to do within this situation.
And what did Kierkegaard have to say about something like I haven't read much Kierkegaard. I have Fear and Trembling here. That's my own familiarity. And then I have another one there I haven't gotten into yet, but it's more of a kind of a compendium on Kierkegaard. But what does Kierkegaard have to say about, or does he address it directly, or does he talk about it in kind of Christian terms, about the conscience, about the source of knowing about right and wrong? So what does he have to say about the thing that we are avoiding through procrastination? Right.
So he believes that conscience is universally distributed. We don't need ethics experts to tell us the right thing to do. Now, sometimes I think he does underestimate certain moral complexities, but in general, I think he's absolutely right about that. And so now we have this whole cult of the ethics expert, all this expert class, which I think he would think is bullshit. You need to take another, like one of the things I wrote about a while back, in the 80s, there was all these scandals on Wall Street. So there was this whole new industry of business ethics. Do you think Wall Street got any better from these guys having to take ethics classes in business school? Fuck no.
2008 would say otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much so. Yeah. So we got to be able to not talk ourselves out of what we know to be the right thing to do. And that's really, and so this is, that's really hard. Suppose your job, you can always say to yourself, well, man, do you think when the Nazis came to power, there were tons of people who thought Hitler was a monster, right? You say one word, you're gone, right? South Africa, right? People that, Nelson Mandela had a family, right? And so that's one of the things in which I argued that the family's we talk about it as this moral foundation, but ultimately it's also a moral temptation. Well, I would have stood up against such and such if it weren't for the fact that I had a family and had to keep my job. So it can be a real temptation, I think, too. And some of the greatest heroes, Martin Luther King, all kinds of people, have lost their family, right? Because they needed to do what was right.
It's one of the darkest elements of the human condition, is that all of us will probably watch Schindler's List and think that we would be Schindler and not one of the Nazi guards, and not one of the people who just hung up a flag so that they just get an easy day. Tomorrow they'll hang up the Nazi flag just to get the easy day and not get bothered. It's when it's at your front door. Even Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning, he in one of the darkest sections of that, where he wrote that all the good people died.
Yeah, he said that. Yeah. They wouldn't put it. And I just read Sophie's Choice, which is a painful book to read. Have you read that?
Yeah, years ago. Yeah, well, about maybe 5 years ago. Yeah.
Wow, but and I didn't realize that the whole issue in that book was what she had to do to survive. And I think, I think that must happen a lot in the military, where at least people come back from, 18 servicemen, vets a day commit suicide in the United States. It's what you might not have done, haunted by what you might not have done, or did. In Vietnam, that was the case. So you're right. So yeah, you can't help but wonder. And it's one thing to step in a boxing ring. It's another thing.
It's another thing to stand up to the SS when they're on your front door. Like, that's the thing with you can go. Obviously, Nazi Germany becomes a kind of a somewhat of an archetypal example, but for that reason,
Right.
it's quite useful as well to remind ourselves that, you know, like that the Holocaust didn't happen at the flick of a switch. Like, it was a slow
Right.
cook. Very little happened until very little happened until all of a sudden you were in the cooker, you know, and
Okay,
it was
that's
like
right. That's right. Yeah.
this slow build, day by day, flag
yeah.
by flag, concession by concession, creep by creep, and then all of a sudden there's trains full of Jews going to the chambers, and
That's
it was
right.
like, it didn't happen overnight. It was the
And you're
amount
pretending
of
like, well, they're going to camp. You're a German there, and you're pretending like, well, they're just being relocated, right? You're telling yourself all kinds of bullshit like that. Yeah.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
sister-in-law said it really well recently. She goes, people didn't just wake up one day and go, oh, let's all walk out the door on the 6th of September and go out and gas Jews. Like, it didn't all happen on one day. It's exactly
No.
what Karen said. It was a slow build over like 10 years or more,
Yeah.
you know, of conditions as well that can be traced back to World War I that really started that, you know, that effect. But yeah, I think it's pretty interesting there, Karen. Yeah.
Could I ask you, Gordon, about because I think you mentioned it in the Art of Manliness podcast where I first came across you before I bought the book. You specifically mentioned the death of Ivan Illich.
Oh man. Ooh, it's proof of God's existence.
I just got that book last week. It's on the
Did
shelf.
you?
I just got it last week.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's a quick read, but such a powerful read. I'm sorry, but what about it? What about it? Yeah.
I was just you said something to the effect that it was one of Tolstoy's best books, or it was there was some very big statement you made about it, and it blew me away when I came across it as well. I was like, this is there it is. Yeah, it's such a small little gem of a book, but I was just curious at what was it about it that hit you so hard, like out of everything.
Well, it would tie up with Becker. I mean, he was saying that people's inability to acknowledge the ever presence of death leads to a society in which where you need these constant distractions. Now, where people weren't human with one another. So the only guy that was the one that took care of Illich was this servant, this young boy who said, "Well, we're all going to die," because he would hold his legs on his shoulder, right? He was aware. So this lack of humanity between people, Tolstoy was tracking to this inability to acknowledge death, and nobody would even acknowledge his that Illich was dying until the end, right? And one of the things that I think he has over Kierkegaard when it comes to this is he places so much emphasis on relationships. Like, it's only at the end when he's able to care at all about his wife, or his kid grabs his hand. So these less than genuine relationships that he had until the very end, until he accepted his death, right? But it's a beautiful, and this combination of this beautiful little details, like how everyone when he dies at the funeral, they're all worried, they're all thinking about, let's go play bridge, you know, we're going to play bridge tonight, and what's going to happen with the money, you know, and it's just, so, man, inspiring writing. And he wrote that after his brother died, and he was depressed. That's what's really amazing about, like, you take James, Styrone, some of these writers that I mean, James was like a fucking basket case for 3 years or so, depressed. And Tolstoy the same way after his brother died. Brother died. He could barely get out, could barely move. Yeah. And he couldn't believe that we were going to die. That's one of the reasons he became a Christian. He said that's the only faith that promises life. And he just could not fucking fathom that we'd be here, go through all this shit, and then just pop like balloons.
Right? And in that, because you can really see that in the death of Ivan Illich, because spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't read it, but like the way it ends, but what's absolutely beautiful about it is at the end where there's that kind of a message that it's never too late to realize your error. You know, that there's always the possibility for redemption should you realize you were off track. You know, that it's never too late. Even if in the final moments, it's never too late.
Right. But there it's repentance, right? He chose to say, "Yeah, we're gonna screw up the book for Ian," but I just think Christian vision at the end there, though. It is.
And how would you compare? Would you with Tolstoy's Christianity and Kierkegaard's? What kind of takes on Christianity did each of them have in terms of the angles that they approach Christianity? Do you know much about the specifics of what way they approached it in terms of differences?
I think Tolstoy believed in imitation. They both believed in the imitation of Christ. Now, and so Tolstoy, of course, came from a very wealthy background and gave away everything and divorced his wife, went berserk because he had everyone living in his estate, and really wanted to imitate Christ, be a servant. Now Kierkegaard thought the way to imitate Christ was for him that he had a special vocation to write, to awaken people. So both of them emphasized action a lot. Acted in different ways.
Yeah, fact and non-verbal.
Oh, stop with the non-verbal. So you got to fucking
Kierkegaard, exactly. That's the irony.
Go to the non-verbal podcast.
Yeah, that's the irony of it. Two of the greatest writers of all time.
I got you to hook to the body there, man.
Let's fuck. We have to end this before fucking Kieran gets knocked out. We might draw a line under this, guys, because I think we'll have a tendency to just sit here for about 8 hours, and it's been nearly 2 hours now. And I want to be respectful to Gordon's time. He's got to have dinner. I have to go to work as well. I have to go and present to the local government, the local state government mining department in about an hour and a half. So I need to go as well. And I ain't going dressed in my pajamas.
I enjoyed to talk to you guys. I wish it was really fun to hang around together.
Yeah, it'd be good, man. If we can ever travel again in the year 2092, we'll come see you.
Whatever, but let's keep in touch. And again, I really enjoyed the conversation and really grateful to you.
Thank you, and thanks for writing this book. Thank you very much for writing this book. It's awesome.
It's absolutely brilliant, yeah. And if you want to go to the show notes, guys, we'll put it in there. The book is called How to Live Authentically in an Inauthentic Age: The Existentialist Survival Guide, Gordon Marino. And if you Google that book, you will see the great Mike Tyson boxer hold up that book into the sky as well. So Gordon is among boxing royalty there as well. We want to see him getting Tyson Fury to hold it up next, and then we'll be
You get me started. You guys didn't let me talk about boxing also.
We'll have to come back and do a part 2 on boxing, actually. Okay, that'd be a nice one, boxing and philosophy together.
That's right. All right. Take good care, guys, and be well. And thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Gordon. Have a good evening. Thanks, Karen.